You will hear a telephone conversation between two friends called Julie and Nick about cheap accommodation in the city of Darwin, Australia. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6.
Hi Nick, it's Julie. Have you managed to find any information about accommodation in Darwin?
Hi, I was just going to call you. I found some on the internet. There are quite a few hostels for backpackers there. The first possibility I found was a hostel called Top End Backpackers.
Okay.
It's pretty cheap. You can get a bed in a dormitory for $19 per person. Private rooms cost a bit more, but we'll be okay in dormitories, won't we?
Sure.
So, that hostel has parking, though that doesn't really matter to us, as we'll be using public transport.
Yeah. Are there any reviews on the website from people who have been there?
Well, yes. They aren't all that good, though. Some people said they didn't like the staff. They had an unfriendly attitude.
That's quite unusual in a hostel. Usually all the staff are really welcoming.
That's what I thought. People said they liked the pool and the fact that the rooms had air conditioning. But the problem with that was that it was very noisy, so they were kept awake. But it was too hot if they turned it off, so they had to put up with it.
Someone told me there's another hostel called Gumtree something.
Gumtree Lodge. It costs a bit more, $45 a person.
What?
Oh, no, that's for private rooms. It's $23.50 for the dorms.
That's more like it.
It looks to be in quite a good location. A bit out of town and quiet, but with good transport and quite near a beach.
Has it got a pool?
Yes, and its own gardens. The reviews for that one are mostly okay, except for one person who said they couldn't sleep because there were insects flying around in the dormitories.
Not for me then. And I'd rather be somewhere central, really.
Right. There's a place called Kangaroo Lodge. They've got dorms at $22, and it's downtown, near all the restaurants and clubs and everything. So that should suit you. And it doesn't close at night.
So there's always someone on reception? That sounds good.
The only criticism I saw was that the rooms were a bit messy and untidy because people just left their clothes and stuff all over the beds and the floor.
Don't hostels usually have lockers in the bedrooms where you can leave your stuff?
Yeah, they do usually, but apparently they don't here. Still, hostels are never particularly tidy places, so that doesn't bother me. And the same person said that the standard of cleanliness was pretty good, and especially the bathrooms. They were excellent as far as that went.
Right. Yeah, I reckon Kangaroo Lodge sounds the best.
Me too. Quite a lot of people reviewing it said it was really fun there. Like every night everyone staying there got together and ended up having a party. So it sounds like it's got a really good atmosphere.
Okay, let's go for that one.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you will have some time to look at the questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Did you get the address of Kangaroo Lodge?
Yes, It's on Shadforth Lane.
Can you spell that?
Shadforth. It's near the transit centre, where the intercity buses and the airport buses drop you off.
Cool. I'm really looking forward to this. I've never stayed in a hostel before. Do they provide bed linen, sheets and things?
Yeah. And you can usually either bring your own towel or hire one there, but they don't usually provide those for free.
Okay. And what happens about meals?
Well, you don't have to pay extra for breakfast. It varies a lot in different places, but generally it's okay. And there's usually a cafe where you can buy a snack or a hot meal for lunch. But actually, if you're really travelling on the cheap, usually for every 5 or 6 rooms, there's a kitchen where you can knock up a snack, and that saves a lot of money.
Great. Right, well, shall I go ahead and book that?
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a guide at an art museum talking to a group of visitors. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Good morning and welcome to the museum, one with a remarkable range of exhibits which I'm sure you'll enjoy. My name's Greg and I'll tell you about the various collections as we go around. But before we go, let me just give you a taste of what we have here. Well, for one thing, we have a fine collection of 20th and 21st century paintings, many by very well-known artists. I'm sure you'll recognize several of the paintings. This is the gallery that attracts the largest number of visitors, so it's best to go in early in the day before the crowds arrive. Then there are the 19th century paintings. The museum was opened in the middle of that century, and several of the artists each donated one work to get the museum started, as it were. So they're of special interest to us. We feel closer to them than to other works. The Sculpture Gallery has a number of fine exhibits, but I'm afraid it's currently closed for refurbishment. You'll need to come back next year to see it properly, but a number of the sculptures have been moved to other parts of the museum. Around the World is a temporary exhibition. You've probably seen something about it on TV or in the newspapers. It's created a great deal of interest because it presents objects from every continent and many countries and provides information about their social context, why they were made, who for, and so on. Then there's the collection of coins. This is what you might call a focused specialist collection because all the coins come from this country and were produced between 2,000 and 1,000 years ago. And many of them were discovered by ordinary people digging their gardens and donated to the museum. All our porcelain and glass was left to the museum by its founder when he died in 1878, and in the terms of his will, we're not allowed to add anything to that collection. He believed it was perfect in itself, and we don't see any reason to disagree.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, You have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Okay, that was something about the collections, and now here's some more practical information, in case you need it. Most of the museum facilities are downstairs in the basement, so you go down the stairs here. When you reach the bottom of the stairs, you'll find yourself in a sitting area with comfortable chairs and sofas where you can have a rest before continuing your exploration of the museum. We have a very good restaurant which serves excellent food all day in a relaxing atmosphere. To reach it, when you get to the bottom of the stairs, go straight ahead to the far side of the sitting area, then turn right into the corridor. You'll see the door of the restaurant facing you. If you just want a snack or if you'd like to eat somewhere with facilities for children, we also have a cafe. When you reach the bottom of the stairs, you'll need to go straight ahead, turn right into the corridor, and the cafe is immediately on the right. And talking about children, there are baby-changing facilities downstairs. Cross the sitting area, continue straight ahead along the corridor on the left, and you and your baby will find the facilities on the left-hand side. The cloakroom, where you should leave coats, umbrellas, and any large bags, is on the left-hand side of the sitting area. It's through the last door before you come to the corridor. There are toilets on every floor, but in the basement, they're the first rooms on the left when you get down there. Okay, now if you've got anything to leave in the cloakroom, please do that now, and then we'll start our tour.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. You will hear a first-year marketing student called Leo talking to a second-year student called Anna about his marketing report. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Anna, I wanted to ask you about my marketing report. I'm not sure about it.
That's okay, Leo. So what do you have to do?
Choose a product or service, then compare two organisations that produce it. I'm doing instant coffee.
But haven't you got a weekend job in a clothing store? Why didn't you choose clothing?
That was my first thought, because I thought it'd give me some practical examples. But when I searched for men's clothing on the internet, there were hardly any articles. So then I looked for coffee, and I found there were tons.
Yeah, there are so many brands on the market now. Okay, so how much have you actually written?
I've done part 1 on economic and technological factors. I found some good data on technological changes, how in Australia Fewer people are buying instant coffee because of cheap coffee percolators that they can use to make real coffee at home.
But there's also a movement away from drinking coffee.
Switching to things like herbal teas instead because they think it's healthier. But that's not really to do with technology. It's more cultural. Anyway, for part 2, I'm comparing two instant coffee companies, Coffee Now and Schaffers, and I've made this table of products.
Right. Let's see. So you've got the brand names and prices and selling size and descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
OK, the table looks good. You'll get marks for research there. Where will it go?
In the section on the marketing mix, under product.
Not in the appendix?
No.
OK, but it's too factual on its own. You need to add some comment in that section about the implications of the figures.
Right. I'll do that. Now, I want to say that I think that Schaffers is more of a follower than a leader in the coffee industry. Now, I'm putting that in the section on market share. Does that seem okay?
Let's see. So, you've begun by explaining what market share is. That's important. But you've got to be careful how you give that opinion.
Do you think it should go in another section?
Well, it's fine where it is, but you've got to back it up with some data, or they'll say your report lacks weight.
OK. One thing I'm worried about is finding anything original to say.
Well, since this is your first marketing report, you're not expected to go out and do interviews and things to collect your own data. You're just using published data. So the analysis you do might not throw up anything that people didn't know before. But the focus is more on how you handle the data. I mean, you might take something like a graph of sales directly from a website, but what makes your work original is the perspective you provide by your interpretation of it.
Oh. You know, it's all so different from business studies assignments at school. It's really surprised me.
What? How much research you have to do?
I expected that. It's more, I knew exactly what I had to do to get a good grade at school. And I knew I'd be expected to go more deeply into things here. But I haven't got information on how the lecturer is going to grade my work, what he's looking for.
Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Well, one thing you have to remember is that in a marketing report, you've got to have what they call an executive summary at the beginning. I forgot that and I got marked down.
Yeah, I've drafted it. I've got an overview.
Have you got something about the background there?
Yeah.
Good.
So, I've just made a summary of the main points. I wasn't sure whether or not I should have my aims there.
No, that's too personal. The executive summary is just like what a manager would read to get a general idea of your report if he was in a hurry.
Right. Then I'm okay for the first main part, all of the macro environment stuff. But it's when I get onto the problem section, I've listed all the problems that Coffee Now and Schaffers are facing. But then what?
Well, you have to prioritise. So indicate the main problems, and then you analyse each one by connecting it with a theory. That's where your reading comes in.
OK.
Have you done your implementation section yet?
I've thought about it. So that's where I write about what could be done about the problems.
Yes. And it's got to be practical, so don't forget to specify things like who would be involved and the cost and the order that things would be done in.
Right. Well, that shouldn't take long.
You'd be surprised. Actually, that's the bit that tends to get badly done because people run out of time. That and the conclusion.
Oh, any hints for that?
Well, it's got to draw out the main points from your report. So it's got to be quite general. You need to avoid introducing new stuff here. It's got to sum up what you've said earlier.
OK. Thanks, Anna. That's been a big help.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about a way of reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
As we saw in the last lecture, a major cause of climate change is the rapid rise in the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over the last century. If we could reduce the amount of CO2, perhaps the rate of climate change could also be slowed down. One potential method involves enhancing the role of the soil that plants grow in with regard to absorbing CO2. Ratan Lal, a soil scientist from Ohio State University in the USA, claims that the world's agricultural soils could potentially absorb 13% of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the equivalent of the amount released in the last 30 years, and research is going on into how this might be achieved. Lal first came to the idea that soil might be valuable in this way, not through an interest in climate change, but rather out of concern for the land itself and the people dependent on it. Carbon-rich soil is dark, crumbly and fertile and retains some water. But erosion can occur if soil is dry, which is a likely effect if it contains inadequate amounts of carbon. Erosion is of course bad for people trying to grow crops or breed animals on that terrain. In the 1970s and 80s, Lal was studying soils in Africa so devoid of organic matter that the ground had become extremely hard, like cement. There he met a pioneer in the study of global warming who suggested that carbon from the soil had moved into the atmosphere. This is now looking increasingly likely. Let me explain. For millions of years, carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have been regulated, in part, by a natural partnership between plants and microbes, tiny organisms in the soil. Plants absorb CO2 from the air and transform it into sugars and other carbon-based substances. While a proportion of these carbon products remain in the plant, some transfer from the roots to fungi and soil microbes, which store the carbon in the soil. The invention of agriculture some 10,000 years ago disrupted these ancient soil building processes and led to the loss of carbon from the soil. When humans started draining the natural topsoil and ploughing it up for planting, they exposed the buried carbon to oxygen. This created carbon dioxide and released it into the air. And in some places, grazing by domesticated animals has removed all vegetation, releasing carbon into the air. Tons of carbon have been stripped from the world's soils, where it's needed, and pumped into the atmosphere. So, what can be done? Researchers are now coming up with evidence that even modest changes to farming can significantly help to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Some growers have already started using an approach known as regenerative agriculture. This aims to boost the fertility of soil and keep it moist through established practices. These include keeping fields planted all year round and increasing the variety of plants being grown. Strategies like these can significantly increase the amount of carbon stored in the soil, so agricultural researchers are now building a case for their use in combating climate change. One American investigation into the potential for storing CO2 on agricultural lands is taking place in California. Soil scientist Wendy Silver of the University of California, Berkeley, is conducting a first-of-its-kind study on a large cattle farm in the state. She and her students are testing the effects on carbon storage of the compost that is created from waste, both agricultural, including manure and corn stalks, and waste produced in gardens, such as leaves, branches, and lawn trimmings. In Australia, soil ecologist Christine Jones is testing another promising soil enrichment strategy. Jones and 12 farmers are working to build up soil carbon by cultivating grasses that stay green all year round. Like composting, the approach has already been proved experimentally. Jones now hopes to show that it can be applied on working farms and that the resulting carbon capture can be accurately measured. It's hoped in the future that projects such as these will demonstrate the role that farmers and other land managers can play in reducing the harmful effects of greenhouse gases. For example, in countries like the United States, where most farming operations use large applications of fertilizer, changing such long-standing habits will require a change of system. Ratan Lal argues that farmers should receive payment, not just for the corn or beef they produce, but also for the carbon they can store in their soil. Another study being carried out.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.